Imagine waking up one day and realizing that you've never truly been alone. Not in the way that matters. Sure, you've had plenty of moments where you've been physically by yourself, staring at your phone, sitting in an empty room, maybe even walking through a quiet park. But despite the solitude, have you ever truly felt it? Have you ever allowed yourself to be alone with your thoughts, your doubts, your fears, and your desires? What if you're so accustomed to distraction, to the constant hum of others' voices, to the flood of information from social media, that you've forgotten what it feels like to be at peace with yourself? This is the paradox of modern life. We are more connected than ever before, yet we are more disconnected from our own selves. The world has never been so accessible, every friend, every family member, every thought, just a click away. But in that same breath, we have never been so alone. Alone, not in the absence of people, but in the absence of silence, the silence that allows you to hear your own heart beating, your own mind thinking, your own soul being. You might find yourself asking, what is wrong with being connected? Why is being around others so bad? We live in a culture that tells us that loneliness is a disease, an affliction to be avoided at all costs. To be alone is to be incomplete, to be left behind, to be deprived. But is that really true? Have you ever stopped to ask why we're so afraid of solitude? Why it's seen as a punishment rather than a gift? In this world of infinite connections, of endless communication, there's a deep-rooted fear that maybe the one connection we really need, the one with ourselves, has been lost. The constant noise, the superficial connections, and the endless stream of stimuli drown out the subtle, yet profound voice inside of you. And in doing so, it locks you in a perpetual state of seeking external validation, of living for others rather than for yourself. But what if solitude, the very thing we've been taught to avoid, is exactly what we need to unlock our fullest potential? What if the answer to our emptiness, our disconnection, lies not in seeking more from the world, but in pulling away from it? This isn't some romantic notion of the loner, or a mere suggestion that you should spend more time alone. It's a deep existential question. Is your constant need for external interaction preventing you from truly knowing yourself? And in that, are you missing out on the very thing that could set you free? When was the last time you sat in complete silence, with no distractions, and simply felt your thoughts, without the urge to drown them out or escape them? When was the last time you allowed yourself to be vulnerable in your own presence, to sit with your own discomfort, your own desires, without running to someone or something else for reassurance? This is where the great question lies. Are you running from yourself? We are in the middle of a cultural moment that celebrates connection but does so at the cost of meaningful isolation. We are taught to fill every moment with something, anything, to keep ourselves entertained and busy. And in doing so, we forget that there is an inner world, an essential part of our being, that can only be discovered in solitude. What would it mean if we started to view solitude, not as a curse, but as an opportunity? What if we allowed ourselves to be alone long enough to hear the truths that only solitude can reveal? It is easy to see why this question stirs up such discomfort. Solitude challenges the very core of what we've been taught. But the very fact that it feels uncomfortable is proof of its power. Because, in order to truly understand yourself, to reach a place of profound personal clarity and purpose, you have to go deep within. You must face the parts of yourself you've hidden away, the parts that are often drowned out by the external noise. It is only in this deep, confronting solitude that we can begin to answer the question that lurks beneath the surface of all of us: who are you, really? And so, I ask you to sit with that discomfort. Allow the question to resonate. Don't push it away. Don't seek out the next distraction. Just ask yourself, what if solitude is not just a void, but a space for you to truly become who you were always meant to be? The answers to these questions may unsettle you, but they are the beginning of a deeper understanding. If you've ever felt the sting of loneliness, it's likely been accompanied by a deep sense of unease, a nagging feeling that something is wrong, that you should be doing more, that you should be with others. That solitude is something to avoid. In a world that tells you that loneliness is a form of suffering, a feeling of abandonment, it's no wonder that so many of us fear being alone. But if we trace the roots of this fear, we find something far deeper than mere discomfort. At its core, The fear of solitude is not merely a fear of being by oneself, it is the fear of being confronted with the most uncomfortable question of all: who am I when the noise stops? It is the psychological abyss that opens when you are alone with yourself, free from the distractions of the world. It is a confrontation with the self, a staring contest with your own inner truths, doubts, and desires. The fear of solitude, then, is the fear of facing this abyss. To understand this fear, we must first explore the psychological and philosophical roots that shape our understanding of solitude. Carl Jung once said, "The most terrifying thing is to accept oneself completely." This statement cuts to the heart of the matter. Jung, the Swiss psychiatrist and psychoanalyst, believed that much of human suffering arises from what he called the shadow, the unconscious part of ourselves that contains everything we refuse to acknowledge or accept. The shadow consists of our repressed desires, our fears, our weaknesses, those aspects of ourselves that society tells us to suppress. Jung proposed that in order to achieve true self-realization and individuation, a person must confront their shadow. This can only happen in solitude, where the noise of the world fades away, and you are forced to face yourself without any distractions. Solitude, then, is not just about being alone, it is about confronting the parts of yourself that you've long avoided. This confrontation, while painful, is the key to personal growth and enlightenment. But many, instead of embracing this darkness, fear it and fill their lives with external noise to avoid it. The fear of confronting the shadow is so deeply ingrained that it has become a cultural norm to fill every moment with activity. It's no coincidence that modern technology, smartphones, social media, the constant flood of information, has become a ubiquitous part of our lives. These external distractions provide a convenient way to avoid facing our own inner void. It is easier to scroll through endless feeds, to chase after likes and comments, than to sit alone with our thoughts. But in doing so, we rob ourselves of the chance to uncover what lies beneath the surface. Friedrich Nietzsche, the German philosopher, took this idea even further. He argued that the modern world, with its emphasis on productivity and external validation, has led to a will to power, a desire to control and dominate everything around us. But this will to power, Nietzsche warned, is ultimately self-destructive. In his work Thus Spoke Zarathustra, Nietzsche famously said, "He who fights with monsters should look to it that he himself does not become a monster." This insight is not just about external forces, it is about the battle within. The more we fill our lives with distractions and external validation, the more we distance ourselves from the truth of who we are. In this way, we become monsters of our own creation, constantly fighting against ourselves, never allowing ourselves the peace and clarity that comes with solitude. Arthur Schopenhauer, the 19th century philosopher, also understood the destructive power of distraction. In his work The World as Will and Representation, Schopenhauer argued that human beings are driven by an insatiable will, a blind force that constantly seeks to fulfill desires but is never satisfied. This will, according to Schopenhauer, keeps us trapped in a cycle of endless striving, never allowing us to experience true peace. But Schopenhauer also believed that the only way to escape this cycle of suffering was through solitude and contemplation. By withdrawing from the world and its distractions, we could transcend the will and experience a state of inner peace. However, this is not a state that modern society encourages. On the contrary, we are taught to fill every moment with action, to never stop moving, to never be alone with our thoughts. This constant state of movement, of action, prevents us from ever confronting the deeper questions of existence, questions that can only be addressed in solitude. Jean-Paul Sartre, the French existentialist philosopher, believed that we are condemned to be free. This means that we are responsible for defining our own existence, yet this freedom comes with a heavy burden. In his book Being and Nothingness, Sartre writes that the human condition is defined by nothingness, the absence of predetermined meaning. It is in solitude that we are forced to confront this nothingness, to accept the responsibility of creating our own meaning in a world that offers none. Sartre's existentialism calls for radical self-examination and self-creation, tasks that can only be accomplished in the quiet of solitude. Lastly, Viktor Frankl, a Holocaust survivor and psychiatrist, developed a philosophy he called logotherapy, which emphasized the importance of finding meaning in life, even in the most extreme circumstances. Frankl believed that the key to surviving suffering and hardship was to find a sense of purpose, something to hold onto in the face of despair. This search for meaning is often a solitary journey, one that requires deep introspection and a willingness to be alone with our thoughts. Frankl's philosophy offers a powerful reminder. In solitude, we find the strength to endure, to rise above our circumstances, and to create meaning in a world that often seems devoid of it. These thinkers, Jung, Nietzsche, Schopenhauer, Sartre, and Frankl, offer us profound insights into the nature of solitude. They show us that the fear of being alone is not just a fear of loneliness, but a fear of facing the deeper, often uncomfortable truths of our existence. It is in solitude that we are forced to confront our shadows, our desires, our fears, and our freedom. Yet, despite the discomfort it brings, it is only through this confrontation that we can truly know ourselves and find meaning in life. But there's a problem. Our society has become so adept at filling the silence, so obsessed with external validation, that we've lost the ability to sit with ourselves. We've created a world that values constant connection and activity, and in doing so, we've lost the art of solitude. And with it, we've lost touch with the most important relationship we will ever have, the one with ourselves. It's time to ask, what are we truly afraid of when we're alone? And how can we reclaim solitude as a tool for self-discovery rather than a source of fear? Let's explore the unseen consequences of this fear and what it's costing us in the next section. You've seen the images, the smiling faces on social media, the endless streams of likes and comments that flood in like a steady tide. You've heard the words of encouragement from friends and family, always pushing you to be more, to do more, to be better. The message is clear: you are what others think of you. And as long as you remain connected, as long as you maintain that constant engagement with the outside world, you are fulfilling some hidden promise that keeps you anchored, keeps you relevant. But what happens when the noise fades away, when the screens go dark, when the echoes of others' opinions disappear? What happens when you're left with only yourself? This is where the unseen consequences begin. The consequences of a life lived on the terms of others, a life dependent on external validation and distractions. At first, it might seem like a minor issue, a few moments of discomfort here and there, a fleeting sense of unease when the phone goes silent. But over time, this accumulation of avoidance, of running from solitude, begins to manifest in ways that are far more subtle, far more insidious than we realize. It shapes us in ways that affect our sense of identity, our relationships, and even our very ability to think clearly and act purposefully. One of the most profound consequences of a life spent avoiding solitude is what psychologists call the loss of self-concept. You may think you know who you are, but the truth is, most of us only know who we are in relation to others. Our sense of self is often a patchwork of external influences: what our friends think of us, what our family expects of us, what society deems successful. In other words, we have no solid sense of our own identity beyond what is reflected back to us by the world. And in a world that constantly changes, so too does our sense of self, becoming unstable, fragmented, and disoriented. Think about it. When was the last time you truly asked yourself, what do I want? What makes me happy? Most people can't answer that question without quickly reaching for external sources to provide the answer. They look to others for approval, for reassurance. They measure their worth through social media validation, job promotions, or relationship statuses. They have become so intertwined with their surroundings, with the expectations and perceptions of others, that they no longer have a clear sense of who they are when stripped of all those external cues. This is the essence of identity fragmentation, a split between who we think we are and who we truly are. And it's a dangerous thing to live with. The consequences extend far beyond the internal sense of self. The inability to be alone with yourself affects your relationships. When you don't know who you are, when your sense of identity is tethered to others, you cannot form authentic, healthy connections. Instead, you may find yourself engaging in relationships that are based on dependency, validation, or fear of rejection. You need others to confirm your worth because you can't do it for yourself. You rely on external praise to validate your existence. In the absence of solitude, we become more vulnerable to codependent relationships, toxic friendships, and unhealthy attachments, all of which ultimately contribute to further alienation from our true selves. This disconnection from the self also impacts our mental and emotional health. Constant external stimulation, whether it's through social media, work, or entertainment, creates a form of mental overload. The brain is bombarded with information, expectations, and comparisons, and over time, this constant influx of data starts to erode our capacity for introspection. Without the time and space to process our thoughts, we become reactive, distracted, and shallow in our thinking. We can no longer think deeply or clearly. We are pulled in so many directions that we lose the ability to focus on what truly matters. The consequences of this are evident in the rise of anxiety, depression, and burnout in modern society. People are overwhelmed by the noise of the world and have forgotten how to sit with their own thoughts. They no longer have the mental clarity to assess their own lives, to make decisions based on their values and desires. Instead, they react to life as it happens, without direction or purpose. But the consequences aren't just psychological, they are also neurological. Research has shown that our brains are wired to respond to external validation and reward. Every time we receive a like on a social media post, our brain releases dopamine, the feel-good neurotransmitter. It's a small hit of pleasure, a momentary boost to our self-esteem. But over time, this constant cycle of dopamine release creates a feedback loop that reinforces our dependence on external validation. The more we seek out external stimuli, the more our brains crave it. This creates a vicious cycle where we become less capable of experiencing joy or fulfillment in the absence of that external validation. We become addicted to the approval of others, to the constant stream of information, to the need to be constantly on. And in doing so, we lose our ability to be content with ourselves, without the need for external confirmation. What is the price of this addiction? It's the erosion of our capacity for introspection, for self-knowledge, for meaningful connection. It's the silence that grows louder every time we ignore our own needs and desires in favor of seeking out the next external fix. And as we become more dependent on these external sources of validation, we begin to lose the very thing that could heal us, solitude. The longer we avoid it, the harder it becomes to embrace it. In the next section, we will explore how to break free from this cycle, to reclaim solitude as a powerful tool for self-discovery and transformation. But first, we must understand how this pattern has shaped us, how it has infiltrated every corner of our lives, and how it is time to rebel against the forces that keep us in this state of mindless disconnection. Now that we've explored the consequences of living in a world that discourages solitude, it's time to ask the most pressing question of all: how do we break free from this cycle? How do we reclaim the space for silence, self-discovery, and authentic connection with ourselves? How do we shift from a life governed by the expectations of others to one that is fully aligned with our true, unfiltered selves? The answer, surprisingly, is counterintuitive. We must embrace solitude. But not in the way society teaches us to fear it. We must reframe solitude, not as something to avoid, but as a sanctuary, a practice that reintroduces us to the most important relationship of all, the one with ourselves. Let's be clear. Embracing solitude does not mean retreating from the world, turning our backs on human connection, or opting for a life of isolation. Instead, it means recognizing that in order to show up fully for others, we must first show up fully for ourselves. It is in solitude that we reconnect with our inner truth, that we reclaim our identity from the noise of the world, and that we find the clarity necessary to live purposefully and authentically. The first step in this rebellion is to confront the very fear of solitude that has been so ingrained in us. It's time to stop seeing being alone as something negative, as a punishment or a flaw. Instead, we must learn to see it as a powerful opportunity, an invitation to dive deep into the quiet corners of our mind, to explore the desires and dreams we've suppressed, and to hear the voice of our true selves. But here's where the challenge lies. Solitude can be uncomfortable, even painful at first. The longer we avoid being alone, the harder it becomes to sit with our thoughts. The silence is deafening, and the feelings that arise can feel overwhelming. But this discomfort is precisely why solitude is so essential for personal growth. It forces us to confront the parts of ourselves that we have been avoiding, the shadows we have tucked away in the corners of our consciousness. By sitting in this discomfort, by allowing ourselves to be fully present in the moment, we begin to heal and transform. Think of the great historical figures who embraced solitude and used it to reshape their lives. Albert Einstein often retreated to his study to work in complete silence, away from the distractions of the world. It was in these moments of solitude that he was able to conceive of the theory of relativity, a revolutionary idea that changed the course of science. Similarly, Virginia Woolf, one of the most influential writers of the 20th century, wrote about the importance of having a room of one's own, a space free from interruption where she could write, think, and create. It was in solitude that she could hear her own voice, untainted by the judgments of others. These examples are not merely anecdotal, they are testaments to the power of solitude as a catalyst for creativity, self-discovery, and innovation. The most profound moments of human achievement often occur when the mind is allowed to rest in quiet contemplation, when it is free from the constant buzz of external distractions. But let's not romanticize solitude too much. It's important to acknowledge that the road to embracing solitude is not an easy one. It requires courage, the courage to sit with discomfort, to be vulnerable with oneself, and to face the parts of our psyche we'd rather ignore. But this is where true freedom lies. Only by embracing solitude can we reclaim our inner peace, find clarity, and create a life that is deeply aligned with our authentic selves. So, how do we start? How do we begin the rebellion against a world that glorifies constant connection and external validation? The first step is to carve out intentional time for solitude. This could be as simple as taking a walk without your phone, spending time in nature, or setting aside a few minutes each day to meditate or journal. The key is to commit to these moments, to resist the temptation to fill them with distractions. Begin small, with just a few minutes of quiet reflection each day, and gradually increase the time as you become more comfortable in the stillness. Next, we must learn to be present in the moment. Solitude is not just about being physically alone, it's about being mentally and emotionally present with ourselves. This means letting go of the constant need for validation, the incessant need to check our phones, and the habit of seeking approval from others. It's about learning to sit with our thoughts, to observe our feelings without judgment, and to allow ourselves to simply be. Another powerful tool in this rebellion is mindfulness. Practicing mindfulness in solitude allows us to become more aware of our thoughts and feelings, to notice the patterns and beliefs that shape our lives. It helps us identify the things that no longer serve us and make space for new, healthier ways of thinking. Mindfulness teaches us to be present with the discomfort, to sit with the uncomfortable feelings that arise in solitude, without rushing to escape them. It is in this space of non-judgment that we can begin to truly know ourselves. Finally, the rebellion against the noise of the world requires us to redefine our relationship with technology. While technology can be a powerful tool for connection and productivity, it also has the power to drown out our inner voice. It is essential that we take control of our digital lives, setting boundaries around screen time and making conscious choices about the media we consume. By creating digital space for solitude, we create room for our own thoughts to emerge and flourish. This process of embracing solitude is not a one-time event. It is an ongoing practice, a commitment to continually return to ourselves, even in the face of external pressures. But with each moment we carve out for ourselves, we reclaim a little more of our true essence. We learn to trust ourselves, to listen to our inner voice, and to live authentically, without relying on others to define our worth. The rebellion is not about rejecting the world or retreating into isolation. It's about finding balance, finding the strength to stand alone, so that we can stand more powerfully in the world, unshaken by external forces, anchored in our own sense of self. Solitude is not the absence of connection, it is the foundation upon which true connection can be built. In the next section, we'll explore the ultimate truth that emerges from this rebellion, one that redefines everything we know about ourselves and our place in the world. It is a realization that will challenge everything you've been taught, and it will leave you forever changed. What if the greatest lie we've ever been told is that we need to be constantly surrounded by others to be whole? What if, in our relentless pursuit of connection, we've missed something fundamental? What if the truth, the profound realization that could change everything, is not found in the endless noise of the world, but in the silence of our own minds? This is the ultimate truth about solitude, the truth that, for so many of us, remains hidden beneath layers of distractions, fears, and social expectations. The truth is not that we need others to define us, to validate us, or to give our lives meaning. The truth is that we are enough as we are. We have always been enough. The moment we embrace solitude, we awaken to this undeniable truth that we carry within us the power, the wisdom, and the strength to shape our own lives. At first, this might sound like a simple, even naive statement. After all, we live in a world that constantly tells us we need more. More possessions, more followers, more approval, more success. But the profound realization comes when we finally understand that more is an illusion. More is a trap, a never-ending chase after something that, once obtained, leaves us feeling hollow, unsatisfied, and yearning for something else. It's a paradox, isn't it? The more we seek externally, the less we find. And the less we seek, the more we uncover. The more we retreat into the silence of our own solitude, the more we come to realize that everything we have been searching for was already inside us. It's only in the absence of external validation that we come to realize our own intrinsic worth. This is the ultimate freedom. To no longer depend on the world to tell you who you are, to no longer rely on the approval of others to validate your existence. To stand alone, not in isolation, but in wholeness. To recognize that you are already complete, even without the external noise. Think back to the moments in history when individuals stood alone, questioning the norms of society, forging their own paths, and ultimately changing the world. Galileo, standing alone in the face of the church's dogma, proclaimed that the earth was not the center of the universe. Socrates, sentenced to death for his ideas, embraced solitude to challenge the moral foundations of Athenian society. Simone de Beauvoir, writing in the silence of her own room, created a manifesto that redefined gender and freedom. These individuals were not special because of their extraordinary abilities, but because they were willing to face solitude, not just as an absence, but as a presence that empowered them to see the world differently, to challenge the status quo, and to redefine what it meant to live authentically. The silence they embraced was not empty, it was full of possibilities. And it is in this same silence that we find our own potential. When we stop running from ourselves, when we stop seeking the approval of others, we tap into a wellspring of creativity, clarity, and strength that we never knew existed. It is in solitude that we discover our true calling, our deepest desires, and the courage to follow them, even when the world around us remains in chaos. The ultimate truth about solitude is that it is not something to be feared, it is something to be cherished. It is not a void, but a vast and fertile ground where the seeds of our most profound transformations are sown. It is only in solitude that we can truly hear the voice of our soul, and only by listening to that voice can we live a life that is truly our own. As you reflect on this truth, let it settle in. Let it reshape the way you view yourself and the world around you. Let go of the constant need for external validation, the belief that you need to be someone else to be worthy. Instead, embrace the silence, the stillness, and the solitude that are already available to you. In doing so, you will come to realize that the greatest gift you can give yourself is not more distractions, more connections, or more achievements. It is the gift of being alone, truly alone, with yourself. The truth is that in solitude, you are never alone. You are always in the company of the most important person in your life, you. And when you learn to be at peace with yourself, you will discover a sense of freedom and fulfillment that no external force can ever provide. As you begin to embrace this truth, you will find that your life will shift. You will approach relationships with a newfound authenticity, knowing that you do not need others to complete you. You will approach your work and your creativity with a deeper sense of purpose, knowing that your worth is not defined by others' opinions. And most importantly, you will find peace within yourself, because you have finally learned to embrace the silence, to sit with your own thoughts, and to discover the beauty of being alone. The journey of solitude is not a destination, it is a practice. A practice that, over time, will reveal to you the ultimate truth, that you, and all your complexity, your flaws, and your brilliance are enough. And in that knowing, you will find the freedom to live the life you were always meant to live. This is the ultimate truth of solitude, that it is not the absence of connection, but the foundation for the most meaningful connection of all, the connection to yourself. And once you realize that, you will never again fear being alone. Instead, you will seek it out, knowing that in solitude, you will find the greatest version of yourself.